Heyo guys, this is a story about what if Naruto, the melt. As a child, Naruto is taken in by Sarutobi to be his chosen successor to the mantle of Hokage. He develops a bloodline long thought lost to the world and learns along the way that, though he may be hated for his demon, his will of fire will burn brightly. And let's see what changes will come to Naruto verse, but before we start, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to this channel for more what ifs and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic. Now let us start.
Chapter 15. Compromise. And here's chapter 15. The last chapter got over more reviews in one day. That's a new best for me. Hope you like this chapter. Readers, reviewers, thank you. Chapter 15. Both Sarutobi had decided he would compromise and do what was best for both. It wouldn't be what all sides wanted, but that's what a compromise was. An agreement between two parties that left them partially satisfied but wanting more. Enko wanted Naruto as a student, but he couldn't give her that. What he could do was give her access to him on a limited basis so his training as an assassin could be supplemented. Naruto didn't want to be on the team of a boy that hated and had sworn to kill him, a girl who could care less about him, and a teacher who didn't care for him one way or the other. So he would refix the teams according to the graduation standings. It was still traditional and sated his needs as well. Konoha's needs were that Uchiha Sasuke be watched like a hawk. Sarutobi felt a talk with Hitaki Kakashi was in order. If the boy showed any signs of stepping out of line, he wanted him brought back in place. If Naruto refused to watch him, then Kakashi would have to do. Sarutobi lit his pipe again and leaned back in his chair. He had sent for Naruto and Enko over an hour ago and they would soon be along. He could always count on those two to be prompt at least. Neither of them had spoken to him since the incident almost 4 days ago, and considering he saw Naruto at home, that hurt. It amazed him sometimes how his job came between him and his family. He and Asuma had had a falling out over Asuma's leaving for the Guardians and it had taken years for them to talk again. Hell, they were still getting used to being cordial with one another. He didn't want that with Naruto. He'd alienated the boy enough as it was. He blew a ring of smoke into the air and watched as it dispersed in the waft of the air duct. He had all but obliterated his grandson's childhood, making the child fight for any scrap of normalcy he could. He'd introduced the boy to the darker side of shinobis before he was even a shinobi. Perhaps, he had taken his job too seriously. It had always been Konoha first, family second. It was his job to be Hokage right now, not Naruto's. That would come later. It was his responsibility to shoulder the burden of the office and all that it held. He only wanted what was best for everyone, but had forgotten that Naruto was still a child, and while he was mature, he still maintained a childish innocence in some respects. It was only right that the boy be allowed to have a small measure of happiness by being on a team that could tolerate him at the very least. Putting him with Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi was a bomb waiting to go off, and Naruto himself would likely be the fuse. It was true that Uchiha Sasuke had openly declared that he would kill Naruto once he had killed Itachi, and that was not to be taken lightly. Naruto certainly didn't take it lightly, and if push came to shove, well, the boy had killed already. And a death threat on a ninja of Konoha was a serious charge. Sarutobi turned his chair to look out the window to the Hokage mountain and sighed heavily. His predecessors stared back at him impassively, and he could almost feel Minato scowling at his village in contempt of how his son had been treated. Not that Sarutobi could blame him. He was only grateful that Minato and Kushina weren't here to evoke their wrath upon the people. A knock at his door heralded the arrival of his appointment for the evening, Enko and Naruto. He bade them enter and listened to the shuffle of their feet as they walked and stood before his desk. Without turning around, he asked if they knew why they'd been called. No, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi winced at the cool chill of Naruto's voice. It was time to face the music. He spun his chair and stared at the two, his pipe clenched in his teeth. Both of you sit. We have much to discuss. The two sat down with no ceremony, staring straight ahead, like good soldiers. Sarutobi rose from his seat and walked to his door, sticking his head out and calling to his secretary. No one is to enter this room. I don't care what the emergency is, no one is to enter here. Understood. The secretary nodded her head fearfully and breathed in relief when the door latch clicked. She felt sorry for the two who were inside. Sarutobi flipped through some hand signs and soundproofed the room before walking back to his chair. He noted that his guest still hadn't looked anywhere but straight ahead, and that saddened him. He only hoped he could repair some of the damage he'd caused. Enko, Naruto, I wish to speak to you about the other day. What I'm about to do does not leave this office, and it is not often I say it to anyone. Enko and Naruto's eyes widened as Sarutobi stood from his chair and bowed to the two of them. I'm sorry. I have been a Hokage to you, Naruto, but not a grandparent in my decisions. Enko, I have neglected you as well. Naruto has been a good influence on you in your time together, and I have failed to see that until now. I want to apologize for my actions the other day. Enko immediately stood and bowed to her leader. Hokage-sama. No, Enko. Don't apologize. What you said the other day needed to be said. Take your seat and we'll talk this out rationally. But Hokage-sama, no. Now sit and we'll talk about what I've decided. Enko sat down, still bewildered, and Sarutobi turned to a somewhat disgruntled Naruto. You have something you wish to say, Naruto? Not really. I believe the word, compromise, is going to be implemented here, and that means that I'm only going to be partially satisfied with your decision. Sarutobi sighed and glared at Enko when she smirked. I knew having your father teach you logic and politics was a bad idea for one so young. You're right, of course. I can't give you both what you want. Enko, you're too important in the role you fill now to devote your time to Naruto. The best I can offer is to let you take him with you think it's a mission he can handle, or if it's an enemy you think he can crack. Enko's smile turned into a frown, but she accepted it as graciously as she could. If that's the best you can do, Hokage-sama, then that's the best you can do, I guess. I'm not happy about it. Duly noted. I'm sorry, Enko, it truly was the best I could do. I hope my apology was at least some consolation. I can't do that in front of anyone but you two. It wouldn't have a commander appearing biased. She nodded her head and listened intently to see what would become of her pupil. Naruto, I'm not going to put you on a team with Sasuke. But you will still be on a team. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is one of the few compromises I've ever made in my tenure as Hokage, Naruto, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. Since you have thrown my previous plans out of whack, I think it is only appropriate that you help me make up for the new teams. Naruto stared at Sarutobi hard, not knowing where this was going. Why would you let me do such a thing? Wouldn't that show some bias on my part toward my friends? Yes and no. I'm going to greenlight what you pick, but I'm also going to make helpful suggestions beforehand. You have 6 candidates for your team, and then you're going to arrange the other teams as well. You'll need to consider who is best for what job and which sensei is best for the team. Of course, Kakashi and Sasuke are already together, so that just narrows it down. I believe you're going to put Haruno Sakura with them as well. Naruto nodded and reached across the table for the files, but was stopped by his grandfather. Remember, Naruto, that this is just another job that a Hokage has to deal with. You have to be objective here and consider all sides of the issue. I want you to look at this in my light for a moment. Who is the worst student grade-wise in your class? Naruto glanced down at the papers and was surprised to find Shikamaru. But he's a freaking genius. Why is he at the bottom of our class? Enko snorted and leaned back in her chair. Because he doesn't apply himself. He's bored, I can tell. I used to be the same way, except I'd actually do the tests instead of half-assing them. That's why his grades suck. Naruto sighed and shuffled Shikamaru's folder to the side. I guess, in a way, it's for the best. Besides Shino, Shikamaru would be able to deal with Sasuke the best. He analyzes things and would most likely be the voice of reason in their group. Truth be told, I don't think Shino would put up with it. He can be cold when he wants to be. Sarutobi nodded and puffed on his pipe some more. The other team. Naruto shuffled the folders some more and laid 3 side by side. This team will do well under Uncle Asuma. Hinata, Shino, and Choji would all benefit from being under him. I was going to put Hinata with Kurenai sensei, but I think she'd do better under Asuma. He's less likely to coddle her, and I think she'd appreciate that. Shino and Choji. Shino could use someone who isn't so rigid to loosen him up a bit, and Choji needs someone to push him. Asuma is lazy, yes, but given the right incentive, he'll teach them what needs to be taught. Tell me, Naruto, what is the purpose of this team? Naruto looked hard at the files and took a deep breath. I've tried to make the teams as balanced as possible. Having overly specialized teams was a good idea since it gives them more practice in that area, but overspecialization can do more harm than good. On Asuma's team we have a tracker in Hinata as well as taijutsu specialist, in Shino we have a tracker as well as detainment, and in Choji we have the tank. Sarutobi nodded his head and knocked his pipe out. Very good Naruto. I know who is on your team now and I can pretty much guess why, but we'll save that for later. I believe you should switch Shino and Shikamaru in their roles. Asuma's team would be too specialized if you don't. Naruto looked at the files again and blinked. You're right. Shino can take Sasuke and Sakura's verbal abuse and they need a tracker. Shikamaru can detain the enemy so Hinata and Choji can decimate them. It's perfect. Anko smiled and ruffled his hair. See, you're smarter than I thought. Naruto knocked her hand aside and glared at her. Sarutobi laughed at their antics and shuffled the folders into separate piles. Now, explain to me why you've chosen Kiba and Ino on your team. Last I heard, you didn't get along with the little Yamanaka very well. Well, Kiba makes the best tracker so I'm kind of biased there I guess. As for Ino, well, besides Hinata she's the only girl who's ever tried to be nice to me, I guess. It was the only way to divide the teams up so they were all even. I guess that is that then. Who is your sensei? Yuhi Kurenai would be a good one I believe. She is unbiased and would help us all the best. And your underlying motive for choosing her? Naruto glared at Anko as she grinned back and rubbed the back of his head. I suck at genjutsu and she's a genjutsu mistress. I kind of thought she might be able to help me. Anko thought he needed a little more needling and leaned over in his direction. Are you sure it isn't because she's hot and you have a schoolboy crush? I do not have a schoolboy crush. But she is hot. Naruto groaned and put his face in his hands. Plead the fifth. Sarutobi let out a bellow of laughter and scooped the files into his arms. Let's call it a day shall we? Anko, I'd like it if you would accompany us to dinner at my estate, and put something decent on please. I have an impressionable young grandson. Anko laughed hard before excusing herself to go to her home to change. Dinner at the Sarutobi household would definitely be interesting later that night. Naruto sat on his desk, eagerly awaiting the teams to be announced. The test had been a mere formality for him, he knew he could pass. And as expected, all his friends had passed as well. Iruka droned on about how they were now ninjas of Konoha and how the fun and games were now over, yada yada yada. The poor man had given the speech so many times, even he seemed disinterested in what he was saying. Naruto's thoughts turned to what he had to do as a concession from his grandfather for allowing him some say-so into the arrangement of the teams. Naruto had promised he would make the effort but he wouldn't press the issue if Sasuke proved hostile. I'll announce the teams now. Try to get along with each other since you may be with these people for several months or years. Remember that you are now shinobi of the Leaf Village and should hold yourself as such. Now then Team 1. Naruto blotted out everything until he heard someone familiar. Team 7 under Hitaki Kakashi. Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Aburame Shino. Sakura leapt to her feet, screaming something about true love conquering all and Naruto could swear that he heard Shino let out a deep breath that sounded somewhat like a growl, the only sign that the bug user was not happy with his situation. Naruto felt sorry for his friend, but if anyone could handle it, it was Shino. Team 8 under Yuhi Kurenai. Uzumaki Naruto, Yamanaka Ino, and Inuzuka Kiba. There were no loud declarations, but Naruto caught Kiba pumping his arm in the air in victory and Akamaru wagging his tail happily. Ino sat behind him so he couldn't see her reaction but he could guess she was still somewhat bummed that she wasn't on Sasuke's team. He'd hoped she'd get over him, but old habits die hard. Team 10 under Sarutobi Asuma. Akamichi Choji, Hyuga Hinata, and Nara Shikamaru. Hinata smiled sadly. She'd so wanted to be on Naruto's team, but Choji and Shikamaru were good friends of hers as well. She'd simply have to make do. Shikamaru leaned his head up off his desk long enough to grin at Choji and smile at Hinata before letting it fall back with a thump. Iruka gave one more small speech, congratulating his former students, before turning on his heel and leaving the room, telling them their senseis would be along shortly. Naruto steeled himself and stood from his chair, making his way across the room. Everyone tensed when they saw where he was heading. Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke saw him coming out of the corner of his eye and readied himself for whatever was to come. He slowly lowered his hand from his mouth to his shuriken pouch, just in case. Naruto stopped just short of his desk and stood there with everyone waiting for the ensuing fight. Sasuke, I have something to say to you. The dark-haired boy looked up into Blue Eyes and stood as well, his hands in his pockets. What do you have to say to me, Uzumaki? Finally come to admit I'm better than you. Not likely. I'm here to offer a truce between you and I. We've been at each other's throats since I started attending this academy, and as fellow ninjas of Konoha, we need to at least be neutral to one another. So, what do you say? Truce. Sasuke looked down at the offered hand as if in disbelief. He'd never had anyone offer anything but pity or well-wishes. Now here was someone he had told personally that he would kill, offering neutrality. Perhaps, he should accept. At the very least he'd have someone who could stand up to him and offer a challenge on neutral ground. Then his Uchiha pride kicked in and he slapped the hand away. He would not be patronized by a person who didn't know his pain. He wouldn't admit equality to one below his station, someone who didn't even know their real family. He would not admit neutrality to a demon. Take your offer and shove it, Uzumaki. You're just trying to get out of your inevitable defeat and death. You will fall before me once I've taken care of him. Naruto let out a slow breath and turned his now cold eyes on Sasuke. I feel sorry for you, Sasuke. You live in your own little fantasy world where everyone is below you just because of your family name. I offered you my hand in goodwill and you spit on it. You won't get another chance from me. If you ever want my respect now, you'll have to come forward yourself. Without another word, Naruto turned and walked back to his desk, thoroughly unsatisfied with the way things had gone. The entire class let out a breath they didn't know they'd been holding, and the tense atmosphere disappeared. As if on cue, the door opened and Kurenai walked in wearing her dress that looks like bandages. She smiled at the class and waved. Hello everyone. I'm here to pick up Team 8. If you'll just come with me. Naruto waited for Kiba and Ino to walk past before he turned to Team 10 and whispered to them. Good luck to you three. Just remember that Uncle Asuma is kind of lazy, so it'll be up to you, Hinata, to motivate him. Shikamaru sure as hell won't do it. Hinata giggled and nodded her head, while Choji chomped on his chips happily and Shikamaru snored. Naruto then turned to Shino and stuck out his hand. I'm sorry about your team, Shino. I don't think I could do it. The bug user pushed his shades up further and blinked. I believe I will be able to handle it, Naruto. If things become too much for me to handle, you will be the first to know. I'll expect you to fill out the paperwork for my transfer yourself. Naruto laughed nervously and rubbed the back of his head. So, you know about that aspect of my job, huh? Indeed. My father does not shelter me from such things. I am privy to information that many of our age aren't, besides yourself of course. I'm sure your bugs have nothing to do with getting said information. Shino's right eyebrow raised slightly, the only indication that he was smirking. That's why I'm a tracking specialist. I play my role well, as do you. Naruto. Let's go, we have a team meeting. Coming, sensei. I gotta go to Shino. I'm sorry. Shino watched the blonde bound out of the door and sighed as he turned to his teammates. He could only hope that Kami didn't hate him too much. Kurenai led her team to her favorite place in the village, a small tea shop in the market district. It was easy to enjoy the peace and quiet that the small shop offered, despite being on one of the busiest streets in the village. Her genin sat down in a booth, Naruto and Ino on one side, she and Kiba on the other with Akamaru on Kiba's head. She smiled at the thought that they were her genin, her responsibility. The idea almost made her shiver with excitement. There weren't many kunoichi who got to her level or beyond. Most stayed at Chunin level or were relegated to the med-nin role. Kurenai had bigger aspirations. Tsunade Sams had become a legend by being the best med-nin ever. Kurenai wanted to become a legend in her own field. She smiled as she looked around the table. She could already say that she had a hand in shaping a future Hokage. That alone was something to be proud of. Kiba would one day be influential in the running of his clan, and Ino would undoubtedly surpass her father if she stuck to training. The girl was already manipulative enough without adding in her family jutsus. Now then children, as you know, my name is Yuhi Kurenai. We've already spent some time together when I was an academy assistant, but I'll be taking a more direct approach to your training. Naruto, you need help with your genjutsu most of all. Quite frankly, in your own words, you suck at it. Kiba laughed until his sides hurt and Ino giggled at the disgruntled look on Naruto's face. Yes, he had said that himself, but the other two didn't have to hear it said like that. Kurenai coughed into her hand and Ino and Kiba settled down. Now that we've all had a laugh at Naruto's expense, let's introduce ourselves. Kiba looked at her like she was stupid and glanced around the table. But sensei, we already know each other. Kurenai smiled at him, a smile that told him to shut his mouth or he was in trouble. Yes Kiba, we do know each other, but not on the level that a successful team does. We need to know each other on a more intimate level. We need to know that we can trust one another. She looked at the three one after the other, Naruto in particular. He had more skeletons in his closet than a mortician, but she wouldn't press the issue. Despite his outgoing personality, when it came to talking about himself the boy was intensely private. I'll start. My name is Yuhi Kurenai. I enjoy making new genjutsus, drinking various teas, and taking care of my garden at home. I dislike perverts, idiots, chauvinists, and those who put down women in my profession. My hobbies are reading a good romance story and keeping my friend Anko in line. My dream is to become world-renowned as a genjutsu mistress and to take you three all the way to the top. Kiba, you're up. The Inuzuka child grinned widely and folded his arms. I'm Inuzuka Kiba. This is my partner Akamaru. I like playing with Akamaru, hanging out with my friends, and perfecting my clan's jutsus. I dislike jerks like Uchiha Sasuke and cats. Can't stand cats. My hobbies are playing with Akamaru and checking out girls. My dream is to be the best tracker the Inuzuka has ever seen. Kurenai nodded and smiled at Ino. My name is Yamanaka Ino. I like working in my own private little garden, shopping, and reading. I dislike Haruno Sakura and all the others who come between me and Sasuke-kun. My hobbies are studying people and solving puzzles. My dream is to get closer to Sasuke-kun and be the one to help him heal, and I want to be a great kunoichi. Naruto and Kiba groaned when she mentioned Sasuke. Kurenai kept her smile on her face, but inside she was groaning as well. She'd thought that Ino had made progress in her fascination with the Uchiha boy, but apparently she'd had a backslide somewhere along the way. That would have to be fixed, one way or the other. Kurenai turned from the starstruck Ino to Naruto. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. I like my family, my friends, and learning new things. I dislike bigotry and stupidity. My hobbies are learning new jutsus and reading up on history. My dream is to be the best ninja of all time. Kurenai clapped her hands slowly and smiled at her students. Now that we have that out of the way, I have a proposal. We can either do the test today or wait until tomorrow. It's your call. The three whispered amongst themselves for a moment before sitting back in their booths. We'll take it now. We think we can do it. But sensei, we've already taken the academy test. Kurenai stood from her seat and motioned for them to follow her. As they walked, she told them of how things really worked. You've passed the academy test, but not my test. If you want to be true genin, you'll need to pass the test I give you. If you can't, the three of you get packed back off to the academy, where Iruka will give riveting lectures for another year. We wouldn't want that now, would we? The three genin shook their heads furiously and followed her in silence. Naruto smirked to himself when he remembered part of his conversation with his grandfather and Anko over dinner. Naruto, if I had forced you to be on Sasuke's team, what would you have done? Naruto grinned and put his fork down. I wouldn't have passed. On purpose. Anko nearly spit her drink out and pounded on her chest. Sarutobi blinked. What do you mean you wouldn't have passed? I would have failed on purpose. I'm not being on that prick's team. You have to remember, Gigi, I'm not a ninja yet, so technically, I'm not under your orders yet. I would have failed the test just to make a point. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow and looked around the table to find interested faces. And what point would that be? Naruto grinned and took a sip of his drink. I'm not always going to agree with you, Gigi. And Uchiha Sasuke is a subject that we will never agree on. What are you thinking about, Naruto? Naruto shook his head when he heard Kiba's voice and smiled at his friend. Nothing much. Just remembering a conversation a couple days ago. They pulled up short when Kurenai whirled on her heel and faced the three genin. My test is a little different from others. I have a friend that will help me administer it. All one you have to do is touch me. I won't move an inch. My friend, however, will be making moves to stop you. She's very good, so I suggest that you don't hold back. Ino raised her hand tentatively. Sensei. Who is your friend? Oh, I'm a very good friend of Kur-chan, aren't I, Naru-chan? Kiba and Ino turned to Naruto to find that woman draped across his shoulders. Naruto had his eyes closed in resignation, fully understanding that he and his new team were officially fucked. Enko was not known for being gentle during training sessions, and since this was probably an official training session, well, he'd just have to touch Kurenai. Enko noticed the smirk building on his face and whispered in his ear. No melting. The smirk immediately left his face. Enko grinned and shunshined to her spot beside Kurenai. Kiba glared at Naruto and he noticed that even Ino seemed a little pissed. That was unexpected. Kiba was never one to let sleeping dogs lie. I hate you. You always find some way to have hot women hanging off you and you don't care. Naruto glared back at his friend. Don't worry, Fido. You're about to find out why her draping herself all over you isn't a good thing. Naru-chan. I thought you liked my boobies. I thought we had something special. She latched onto Kurenai and began to sob into the woman's shoulder while Kurenai tried to hold back her laughter. Kur-chan, Naru-chan doesn't love me anymore. My boobies aren't good enough for him. Kurenai patted Enko's back, soothing her. It's okay, Enko-chan. I'm sure by the end of this session, Naruto will be all yours again. You know he can't resist your charms. Enko sniffed a bit and wiped the crocodile tears from her eyes, before grinning and pulling two kunai from her trenchcoat. I can't wait. Okay kiddies, come and try to get Kur-chan. And Naruto. I hope you've been eating candy lately because your blood needs to be a little sweeter. Kurenai raised her hand and dropped it, watching as the genin disappeared. Enko pouted and turned to her. They ran away. Now I have to wait to cut someone up. Kurenai sighed and folded her arms. Enko, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Enko grinned and relaxed her stance. The genin wouldn't be attacking just yet. Let's discuss my favorite fox, shall we? Did you know he went on his first mission with me the other day? Kurenai quirked an eyebrow. That hadn't been in the files. Do tell. Naruto looked around the underbrush. He had to find his teammates before they did something rash, like rush Enko. She might not kill them, but they didn't heal like he did and Enko was less likely to care. He'd been around the Hokage office enough and filed enough reports on genin teams to know that the tests were always about teamwork. Now he just had to implement that. Unfortunately, he was restricted from using his Kekkei Genkei. He snuck through the bushes and found Ino hunched over behind a shrub, staring out at the two talking women. Naruto rolled his eyes and snuck behind her before clapping a hand over her mouth. Ino started to squeal and struggle before Naruto bent down and hissed in her ear. Quiet. She'll hear us. We need to find Kiba and Akamaru now. The only way we'll pass is if we work together. If we don't work together, we'll fail. Ino nodded and he took his hand off her mouth. So where is Kiba? I don't know. We'll have to look for him. Keep behind me and hold my hand. Enko-sensei is very vindictive and she won't hesitate to pick you out because you're the weakest of the three of us. Ino scowled at him and smacked him in the back of the head. I'm the weakest. What the hell does that mean? Physically, I mean. Enko-sensei is a very physical woman and she won't hesitate to strike out, even if she's supposed to be guarding Kurenai-sensei. She gets bored easy. Come on, we have to find Kiba. It didn't take long to find Kiba since he and Akamaru burst out of the bushes and ran straight for Kurenai. Enko never stopped talking to the woman as she stepped in front of Kiba's assault and grabbed him by the collar of his jacket before wrapping Akamaru in her Sene Jashu snakes and hurling them across the clearing and back into the shrubs. Naruto and Ino immediately bolted towards the point where Kiba had landed. Enko could sense them running and was slightly disappointed in Naruto for not concealing himself better. But then again, he was towing a very green genin behind him. So, he's already killed 4 people. And done an interrogation. Yup, he's my prize pupil. You better not let him get soft. Naruto and Ino finally reached the spot where a knocked-out Kiba was being licked by a limping Akamaru. Enko had thrown both right into a tree but Kiba took the brunt of it, saving Akamaru a broken leg. Naruto smacked his friend across the face and stood up when his eyes fluttered open. Come on Kiba, get up. We have to work together to get past Anko-sensei. Kiba stood up and shook his head before picking Akamaru up and stuffing him inside his jacket. And how are we going to do this? She's too fast and strong. Anko-sensei is surprisingly easy to fool if you know how. You just have to offer her something she wants. Ino quirked an eyebrow. And that would be. Naruto answered by shucking off his black shirt and peeling off his mesh undershirt, making Ino blush at his well-toned body. He threw the clothing aside and rolled his shoulders before pulling his knife from its scabbard. You offer her a fight in blood. She'll leave Kurenai-sensei's side and you two will rush in to touch her. Akamaru first, then Kiba, then Ino in a straight line. Quote. Ino got her blush under control and her eyes widened when she saw his field knife. She hadn't really noticed it being that big and now Naruto had it in his teeth as he tightened his hitai. What are you going to do? I'm going to engage Anko-sensei. She can't do anything any worse than she usually does in training. Just do as I told you to and everything will work out fine. What do you mean blood? Anko-sensei has a thing for making people bleed and she says she likes the taste of my blood. I'm going to offer it up to her. Now just wait for me to lead her away. Without another word, Naruto walked out of the brush and calmly made his way to the center of the clearing. Kurenai saw him coming and whistled. Wow, he's pretty buff for a kid. You make him work out a lot. Anko turned and found one of her favorite sights in the world, a shirtless Naruto, ready to bleed. She licked her lips and turned back to Kurenai. Her eyes followed the blonde across the clearing till he stood on the opposite side he'd come from. The smirk he had told her he had something planned. Hey Anko-sensei, how about a game of chase? If you win, you get to cut me up. Anko whimpered and looked from Naruto to Kurenai and back again. She'd promised to help Kurenai, but he was offering her blood and she whined piteously. Kurenai sighed. Just go get him Anko. He's the more dangerous of the three anyway and I only promised not to use my hands. I never promised not to use genjutsus that I've mastered without seals on them. Anko grinned and took off after Naruto, who yelped and turned to run. Wait up Naru-chan, I just wanna make you bleed. You know you like it. Kurenai turned to where Akamaru, Kiba, and Ino came charging out of the brush and set up a genjutsu to hide her position. The three halted in their run and looked around. Kiba sniffed the air. She's still here. She's using a genjutsu to hide her position, but she didn't mask her smell. Ino, you're better with genjutsus than I am, so try to dispel it. Ino nodded and put her hands in the release sign, dispelling the low-level jutsu. Kurenai smirked and formed a few bunchins to catch them off guard, throwing in a genjutsu to fool Kiba's and Akamaru's smell receptors. Kiba sniffed the air and dodged a punch when the clone got too close. They smell real. I think they're shadow clones. If we can hit them solid then we can dispel them. Ino dodged a kick from the teacher lookalike and rolled forward. The bunchin threw another punch and Ino lashed out, her kick going right through it. That one was fake. I'm not nearly as good at taijutsu as you and Naruto. Kiba growled and pulled a kunai out, lashing out with abandon. He dispelled the bunchin and jumped back beside Ino. Well, the brains aren't here so it's up to you. You're smarter than me so think of something. I'm not going back to that academy. Give me a second. Ino continued to think as Kiba fought off the bunchins and it suddenly came to her. All we have to do is touch her right. Yeah, so. Get Akamaru and follow me. I'll explain as we run. Kiba scooped up his puppy and followed her in a sweep around Kurenai's flank. His eyes twinkled once she was through explaining and they changed course running right for their sensei. Kurenai quirked an eyebrow and sent a few more bunchins their way, disguised as Anko. Ino dodged their swipes and bent low, allowing Kiba to use her back as a springboard. Kurenai watched with interest as he launched a white object through the air. She followed its descent with her eyes and blinked when it landed on her head. She glanced up only to have Akamaru lick her in the face. Kurenai laughed and dispelled her bunchins. The exercise was over. That's enough. You passed my test. Technically, one of you is supposed to touch me, but since Akamaru is Kiba's partner and therefore an extension of himself, I'll count it. Now let's go save Naruto before Anko bleeds him dry. The two genin nodded and followed their new sensei to find their wayward teammate. The sight before them left Kiba wide-eyed and somewhat fearful of females and Ino slightly jealous, afraid, and aroused. Kurenai just covered her face with her hands and groaned. Naruto was laid out spread eagle on the ground, his waist still bare, and his arms and legs held down by pythons Anko had summoned. Said woman had cuts littered all over the blonde's body and was moaning in ecstasy whenever she licked his blood from her kunai. Kurenai coughed into her hand and Anko looked up, grinning like a maniac. Hey Kur-chan, squirts. Want some? It's really tasty. Kiba and Ino shook their heads quickly and Kurenai sighed. The test is over Anko, so you can let him go now. I need to talk to all three besides. But I just caught him a little while ago. I haven't even gotten to his pants yet. And I'm sure Blondie over there is curious as to what's in them from the blush on her face. Ino squeaked and Kurenai grabbed Anko by the collar. Dispel your summons please Anko. You can have him after we're finished. Anko pouted but waved her hand, dismissing the summons. Naruto stood up and cracked his back before grinning at his teammates. So, we passed. They nodded dumbly. Kurenai smiled and put a hand on his shoulder. Yes, you three did. That was very noble, sacrificing yourself so your teammates could get closer to me. Foolhardy, but noble. Now, Team 8 has officially passed my test. We'll meet at the Hokage Tower tomorrow at 8 AM for our first assignment. Kiba, Ino, you should go home and rest. I'll try to liberate Naruto from Anko. Kiba and Ino nodded and left for home, both offering Naruto sympathetic looks before scampering off to celebrate with their families. Kurenai turned back to find Anko nuzzling Naruto's cheek and the blonde rolling his eyes as if it was an everyday occurrence. Naruto, Anko has told me certain things about you that I was not aware of. How about we all go out for some dango and discuss your Kekkei Genkei? Shouldn't Ino and Kiba have come along too? Kurenai shook her head and smiled. Not just yet. Those two have the biggest mouths in your graduating class. I'd like to let them know slowly if possible. Besides, your file is mostly classified and as your sensei, I want to know more about my pupil. I expect the same courtesy you show Anko. Naruto's eyes widened and he stepped back. You're not a vampire too, are you? Kurenai laughed and went to help him find his clothing. No, I'm not. I prefer less sadistic tendencies. Now get your shirt and let's go. We have a lot to discuss. I prefer him shirtless. Not now Anko. A few minutes later found Naruto in the company of two beautiful women in a dango shop. He couldn't imagine what they wanted to talk about, but from the calm look on Kurenai's face it must be important. Kurenai swallowed her dango and looked him in the eye. Let's talk about a few things Naruto. Like your Kekkei Genkei, your feud with Sasuke, and your role on my team. Naruto took a sip of his tea and let out a deep breath. What do you want to know? Hope I satisfied some people with this one. Genin life begins next chapter. Let me know what you think.
Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.